two things in this bill that seem to make lawmakers nervous so far is unlimited plant counts and the ability to home cultivate cannabis. The concern seems to be that maybe home grows and a limited supply will feed the illicit market. Are we talking about dangerous people tied to drug cartels when we talk about the, quote, illicit market?
We're not talking about dangerous criminals when we're talking about a handful of people across the state who are going to grow a handful of plants. So no, I don't think this is a matter of fueling the illicit market, nor cutting into the profits of any industry players.
Megan, did you have questions? I'm sorry.
Well, I think they're also, the legislators are talking to other states, Colorado specifically, and have some concerns about, even if we legalized, we could have a black market. What do you think the bill does that would address some of these concerns, which has, I mean, it did happen in Colorado and other places.
I mean, I think we all agree that there is a flourishing illicit market right now, and there has been, right? Until we legalize at a federal level, we're not going to completely eliminate an illicit market. So I think that's, something we all agree on, but there are ways that we can try to cripple the illicit market here in New Mexico. And, I believe that House Bill 12 does build in some of that, those ways. So, one of the reasons is really allowing small business to get into the market. So this idea of creating micro businesses where you don't have to have the same amount of capital to get in, the fees are lower. So what we'll see are smaller businesses moving in, especially in rural areas, giving access, creating these access points for people to purchase in a legal regulatory model, not in the illicit market. It also allows people who have been making their living in the illicit market to move into a legal market. We want that, right? We don't want to not allow someone who's perhaps been previously charged with a drug conviction not to be able to move into the legal above ground market. And so House Bill 12 also makes sure that individuals who may have had a prior drug conviction, allow them to work in the industry and be licensed, that wouldn't be the sole reason a license is denied. It was based on their prior record. So those are two really important pieces of the bill that are not only about equity, but it's about addressing the illicit market. The other piece is around your tax rate. When your tax rate is too high, you're going to see the illicit market flourish. And so when we're talking about Colorado, there's a stark difference in those tax rates from what's provided in House Bill 12. So what we have heard is sort of, and you'll hear the sponsors talk about this sweet spot is around 20% tax. And if you look at Colorado, their tax can be as high as 30%. So I think that's important as we look. Even in Arizona, I believe their tax rate, their excise tax is 16%. If you add on GRT to that, I imagine it'd be well over 20%. So we're surrounded by states with higher tax rates. I think that's going to make a difference in New Mexico.